Every time that you do a fast wrong, my dog has to go to the vet. But seriously, this is a revised 2021 updated intermittent fasting mistakes video. Now, I'm not gonna just make it super generic. This is all stuff that I've learned over the past couple of years that's allowed me to create these kinds of videos to allow us to do the best possible forms of fasting. Now, I've divided this video into pre-fast mistakes, mistakes we make before we go into a fast, and mistakes we make after we break our fast. I'm going to leave out the middle section because during a fast, spoiler alert, I want you to keep it simple. Water, black coffee, simple tea, that's it, okay? We could go into detail with other things, but anyhow. But pre-fast, the mistakes that I see people making now, not eating the correct pre-fast meal. Okay, it used to be that, like, hey, you just eat whatever you want and then go into a fast. But now there's some really interesting science. If you're not eating like a Mediterranean somewhat style meal prior to going into a fast, you're leaving a lot on the table. Are you not going to get the effects? No, you'll still get the effects of a fast. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be completely hoity-toity weirdo here, but the reality is there's good evidence. The journal Lipids had published a study that showed that Mediterranean spices like rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage, they contain something called hispidulene, which activates PPAR alpha, which I've talked about a lot, but in case you're wondering what that is, PPAR alpha is what allows us to get fat adapted. That is the whole idea behind fasting. We're trying to get our body used to utilizing fats as a fuel source and becoming efficient at utilizing sort of endogenous sources of fuel within our body. So this could upregulate that process and help us get a ton more out of our fast. Again, you don't have to do it, but it certainly will help, and it's a big mistake, in my opinion, not to. But secondly, is going to be adding omega-3s in prior to going into a fast. Because once again, the journal Biochemistry published a study that showed omega-3s once again stimulate PPAR alpha. I may sound like I'm being way too critical on this PPAR alpha thing, but that is everything with a fast, at least in my opinion. All the cascading like downstream effects, mitochondrial biogenesis, PGC1A, all that stuff is coming as a result of the translocation of PPAR alpha and getting that into the nucleus so we can become fat adapted. Anyhow, I digress. A Mediterranean style meal with some like high fat salmon, along with some Mediterranean spices, along with some veggies, which is the next piece of this. Veggies are so important prior to going into a fast. Why? Because veggies are going to potentially allow you to get into a ketogenic state during your fast faster, which means more growth hormone production, more muscle preservation, and more cognitive function. Okay, vegetables break down into what is called butyrate within our gut. Okay, and now that butyrate is only one hydroxy group away from beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone. What this means is that when you break down the fibers in veggies, they don't just disappear in your poop. They actually turn into something that is metabolically active and can stimulate the production of ketones per a 1962 study that was done in mice that found that butyrate in the gut directly equated to more ketone production. Okay, now talking about fibers additionally, having the right kind of fibers can improve your fast significantly. So not focusing on that. So having like fenugreek. Fenugreek is rich in what is called galactomannan fiber, which is even more water soluble than traditional soluble fiber. So it draws more water into your colon, which is going to keep you satiated throughout the entirety of your fast. But you don't have to have straight up fenugreek root. You can actually have fenugreek seed extract, and it still has a powerful effect. There are some studies that indicated even just the seed extract can trigger an 11% curbing of your hunger. So it's kind of foolish not to take these things into account. But I think the big mistake, the biggest piece we have to focus on pre-fast is going to be not rotating up your meals prior to a fast. Rotate your foods slightly. Why is this? Because when you go into a fast, your body is going to trigger a microbial response to like break down and allow certain bacteria to flourish based on that last meal that you ate. Okay, if you rotate the foods up, you give yourself a chance to allow different bacteria to flourish. Let's say you only ate asparagus and chicken every day before you started a fast. Well, all the bacteria that's associated with breaking down asparagus and chicken are going to flourish. And you're going to have a lot of opportunity for them to flourish during a fast because the last meal that you eat really primes those bacteria to thrive. So if you did that, you'd end up with this huge imbalance of the bacteria that are associated with that food. By rotating it up, you allow different bacteria an opportunity to flourish, leaving you with a more diverse microbiome. People that fast and interfast the same way all the time probably end up with a good degree of dysbiosis. Now let's jump into the mistakes that people make after a fast. The first one is not getting enough protein. Plain and simple. This is so dang important. Okay, you have so many different things that are elevated. You have human growth hormone that's elevated. You have all these different ketones that are elevated, all these different kinds of things that are going to potentially preserve muscle, but also put you in this prime spot to recover. So right when you break your fast, if you're not having protein, you really are leaving a ton on the table and potentially putting yourself at risk for not being able to actually recover properly. I usually recommend some chicken, some turkey, some fish, something that is rich in thiamine, because that's going to allow you to, again, develop that glucose tolerance that just kind of kicks you back into regular metabolism a little bit faster. Or if I'm on the go or making it simple, I'll use a pea protein shake. The one I use down below, it's called Sun Warrior. So I put a link down below for that one. You can save 15% off if you use that link down below. It's a pea protein, hemp protein blend. So technically it's plant-based, but I like it because it still has the additional fibers and the compounds that I want right after I break a fast too, just in a really small degree. But I'm getting that component. I'm getting that ease of digestion so that I don't end up having to break my fast with a bunch of whey protein, which I'm not opposed to whey protein, but right after a fast, it does spike your insulin, okay? It's not a carbohydrate, but it still spikes your insulin, which I'll get to in just a minute. So I wanna keep it just simple protein that doesn't have a heavy insulin spike. So pea protein is usually the route that I would go with that. So again, big thanks to Sun Warrior down below. They're a continued supporter of this channel for 3 or 4 years now, and I put them down below in the description so you can save a couple bucks and give them a shot. Okay, the second mistake is having high glycemic carbohydrates. Okay, we do not want this huge spike in insulin right when we break our fast. Okay, that can throw off electrolytes, that can throw off a lot of different things, but can also trigger an inflammatory response within the body. Okay, the third mistake is going to be having a copious amount of saturated fat. Okay, a lot of this comes right back down to you should just be having some pure protein and then later eat more. We'll talk about that in a second. Saturated fat right when you break a fast, and again, full disclaimer, I like saturated fat, just not right when you break a fast. It's mechanically hard to digest, so it can trigger the seepage of lipopolysaccharides, an inflammatory, just pathogenic compound, to leak through the intestinal tract into the bloodstream, triggering an inflammatory cascade. After you break a fast, you are already in a highly inflamed state. It's normal because you haven't been eating and all of a sudden you eat. But if you compound that with pathogenic material that shouldn't be in the bloodstream that's leaked in from the gut because of sort of mechanical, kind of mucosal damage, you really make things worse. So lean protein, and then 30, 60 minutes later, then have a more solid meal, which is the next mistake, right? Is having all your foods at once, breaking your fast and just binging. No, lean protein, and then 30, 60 minutes later, then add stuff in. And the next piece you want to be paying attention to right when you break your fast is I love having electrolytes during my fast, but I do not want you to have them right when you break your fast, and here is why. Okay, during a fast, your blood levels of electrolytes stabilize because your body is trying to keep those plasma levels stable. So what that means is during your fast, electrolytes are coming out of the cell and into the bloodstream to maintain serum plasma levels where they should be. Once you eat, and your insulin spikes and your GLUT4 transporters open, what happens is your electrolytes that are now flooded in the bloodstream will flood into the cell, okay? Well, this is because of law of osmolarity. Basically, you're gonna have sodium and all these minerals that are in the bloodstream that now get a chance to go into a lower concentration space, so they flood into that cell. If you have a bunch of salt right when you break your fast, you are adding more sodium and more electrolytes that are gonna flush right in there. Why is this bad or problematic? Well, you have a membrane that is there, and it's this gradient that occurs. And if you have a massive rush of electrolytes that flush in, you can actually damage that membrane and cause some cellular damage. And over time, that is not a good thing to do. So just wait 30 minutes or so before putting your electrolytes into the mix so that your body has a chance to kind of naturally find homeostasis, because the way that you sit from an electrolyte balance during your fast versus the way that you are after your fast, it's kind of like two different beasts. So don't try to meld it. Try to let your body develop homeostasis first and then bring the sodium back in. The next mistake that people make is when they do add carbs back in, they're adding very high glycemic, high glucose foods. Okay, I would recommend starting with fructose-glucose combination. Fructose does not spike your insulin as much. Now, I know normally I would say don't have copious amounts of fructose, and that still stands. I don't want you just binging on fruit, because too much fruit is going to ultimately convert into fat via de novo lipogenesis. But 20, 30 grams of fructose coming in from some fruit, if you are consuming carbs, not doing keto in other words, could actually be somewhat beneficial because it gets the body somewhat primed without having this massive surge of high glycemic carbohydrates. So just to recap here, pre-fast mistakes: not eating Mediterranean spices, not consuming omega-3s, not getting enough fiber, okay, not switching up your meals, not rotating that stuff, okay, post-fast mistakes, not getting protein in right when you break your fast. Next mistake, having way too many carbs right when you break your fast that are high glycemic. Number 3 is going to be having saturated fat. Number 4 is going to be having electrolytes right when you break your fast. Number 5 is going to be not waiting that 30, 60 minutes to have a larger meal after your first small meal. And finally, it's going to be having too much in the way of glucose and not enough in the way of fructose when you first break your fast. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel. If you want more of these kind of fasting mistake style videos, let me know and I will see you tomorrow.